Hello, and welcome back to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live video series. And joining me this week to share the stories behind the 10 books that influenced him the most on his life path is Colm Holland. Colm is a UK-based author who spent 25 years working in sales and marketing in the publishing industry. And if you've seen the newsletter, then you know that he was a member of the HarperCollins team that published Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist in 1993. In fact, I think you were a bit more than a member, Colm. You can fill us in on that a bit later because it's a great story. But I just want to say that Colm is an experienced teacher, and his interviews and articles are highly entertaining, full of humour and deep insights. And he's on a mission to help others find true empowerment through inner transformation. And his latest book is The Secret of the Alchemist, and it's already on Amazon's bestseller list. So Colm Holland, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sandra. That was a lovely introduction. I'm going to try and live up to that now if I can.
Yeah, we all sound good on paper.
Yes, yes, it's called. Yes, we've all been taught the art of the CV, have we not? Or if we're not, then our publicists tend to do it for us.
Yeah. Unfortunately, CVs don't take into account the fact that we're all human.
Oh yes, well that's that's a minor problem.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, you've watched a few of these, I know, so you're familiar with the way it goes. The first two questions are, what do books mean to you?
Books mean pretty much half my life in terms of my energy, my time, my interest. I used to be a school teacher. I started as a school teacher, and of course, books are central, especially back then because we didn't have the internet. So I'm talking, probably mid 80s when I started teaching in high school. So it was only books. So that's where it began. And I'm, before that, college, university, books. And then I made the leap to actually go and work in publishing. So books have meant so much to me that I devoted at least half my life to selling them, marketing them, because I believe that they are windows into the soul. And the written word. Do you remember Fahrenheit 451?
I remember the
Ray Bradbury.
Yes.
I remember reading that when I was in high school personally when I first read that. It terrified me. I thought, oh no, this is it. Oh no, we're going to burn. For those who don't know Fahrenheit 451, I'm sure some of your guests have chosen that book. It'd be hard not to at some point. But it portrays a state that is essentially now the time that we're in the future, where people just sit in a room where each wall is a screen and they are participants in soap operas, and they don't work because they don't need to work because robots do all the work. And so we pass our days by just participating in these soap operas. But there are a few insurgents still who believe in these things, these weird things called books. And the fire brigade's job is not to put fires out, it's to go and arrest people who've still got books. And then they take the books out of the house and they go and burn them. So that had such an impression on me. I thought, that's not going to happen. Not in my lifetime. So, there you go.
Yeah. It's nightmares come to life, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, when you watch things like, Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, various different things going on around the world. And what you see now is a big bank of TV screens with people's faces, because all the, spectators are there on screen. There it is, right there.
Yeah, I'm not anti-technology. My life has been built on technology. Because later on, I went on and I started one of the largest digital online agencies in Australia. So I'm also very much in favour of that. But I'm most in favour of education, and I believe that books are still at the heart. Ironically, just FYI, there are more books sold every year now since the birth of the internet than ever before. In fact, there are probably more books published this year than have ever been published at any other time if all added up together.
That's because everybody's got nothing else to do.
Thanks.
Everybody's
Oh
writing
yeah,
a book.
so don't bother reading my book, The Secret of the Alchemist, because it was just an idle moment when I threw it together.
Well, it does get harder and harder. I mean, the whole point of this book club is to provide a kind of guidepost for people, because, you know, there's so much material out there. How
Sure.
is somebody to know, you know, what is good, what isn't, especially if they've just woken up and they're looking to follow a spiritual path? They have no idea where to go.
Yes, no, absolutely. And it's very confusing. And there are so many voices in the marketplace all saying, you know, buy me, buy me, buy me. And we kind of have to be guided a bit by our own intuition. That's people say, what should I read? And I go, well, I believe that when you set out, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, and my book as well. But when we set out on that journey that you just described, so I'm a newbie, I'm exploring spirituality, I'm exploring self-awareness, I'm exploring you know, my own inner self. What do I do? Then actually what Paulo Coelho says in The Alchemist, and what I believe as well, is that the universe hears that. The soul of the world, as he calls it, hears that, and will lead us, actually, will put books, we'll put people, we'll put events, we'll just send messages and say, go this way, you know, go that way. A bit like Alice in Wonderland, if you like, you know, the little labels on the bottle, you know, drink me, open this door, and so on. But that, yeah, and of course, Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, in his theory of synchronicity, that is what synchronicity is.
Yes.
He was often criticized by fellow psychologists because he believed in the mystical side of the human psyche. And so he believed, and you know, I agree with him, is that when we are on a particular psychic path, when our thoughts are on a particular track, then we are connected to the whole of the psychic human consciousness, and that will come to our aid and will actually perform omens and synchronicity and events just to encourage us along the way.
I agree with that. And, you know, I have a little kind of tagline on the website, you know, books for me, they're doorways to other dimensions of ourselves.
Yes.
They open up all those doors within us.
Yes, the best novels in the world, of course, are doors to other dimensions and so on. And I know I was listening to your interview with Teresa Chung, the last one, and you guys talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the second question that we ask is, what was it like for you, and particularly you, having been exposed to so many books in your career, to have to pick just 10?
Oh, horrible, terrible. I regret the decision already. I got a bookcase because here's an interesting thing, because I worked in publishing and I had access to, you know, as many books and whatever that I wanted. In the houses when I was in publishing, I just kept having to keep going and buying bookcases and bookshelves, and our entire house was one mass of books and bookcases and bookshelves and so on. And then when I got involved in the digital age, I won't forget it. One day I just made the decision that I was going to get rid of all of them, because the majority now I could get online. So I did a massive clear, and I went down to the Salvation Army and I had carloads of these books, and I tried to donate them and they wouldn't take them. They said, you know, so, but out of those thousands of books, and it was literally thousands, as you can see now, I've gone totally paperless almost. I've still got a few copies of various ones that I keep close, but the decision was hard because no one book ever influences us more than another, and they tend to lean on each other, because human knowledge and insight and wisdom is something we own together, and there isn't any one of us who has the complete insight. That's my personal view on it. So I'm an avid reader. I'm an absorber of insight and knowledge and wisdom and education in my limited hours that I have to absorb it. But one thing I did do, which is really interesting, Sandra, was when I was writing my book, The Secret of the Alchemist, I stopped reading everything else for about 6 months before. And for the 3 years, can you imagine? It was like withdrawal symptoms. For the 3 years that I was writing that book, I deliberately didn't read or refer to anybody else who was writing on a similar subject at all. Because I know how influenced I can be.
Yeah.
Like songwriters who hear a tune and then forget it, but then one day their subconscious resurrects the tune and they write this hit song and they get sued because actually somebody else wrote that. They just forgotten that they'd heard it. I think Ghostbusters is one of those. But yeah, so the 10 books have been chosen ultimately because I still refer to them. That's what that's why I selected these particular 10.
I think that being without books to read for even a week is like hell.
Yeah.
I just could not. I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it.
But I'm also a huge fan of movies. So if I'm not reading a book, I'm watching a movie. If you'd asked me to choose 10 movies as well, that would have been equally difficult, but I could give you 10 straight off that I would say have influenced me almost. Some movies that have influenced me almost as much as these 10 books that we're going to talk about today.
Okay, well, let's start with book one and I don't know if you put these in order, but certainly number one is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So, and you were the Australian marketing director at HarperCollins.
Yeah.
And, why don't you tell us the story of how this book came about, and then you can tell us how it impacted you.
Okay, bit of factual background just to fill in the tapestry. Paulo Coelho was unheard of in 1993. He hadn't had any books published in English. Nobody had heard of him particularly because he was Brazilian and he wrote in Portuguese. He still writes in Portuguese. All his books are translated by somebody else. English is not his first language, and I know he gets embarrassed about his English, which he shouldn't because his English is impeccable. But he wrote The Alchemist in around 1991, 92. He'd previously written a book called The Pilgrimage, which was not the original title. It was called The Diary of a Magus. Those that have read The Pilgrimage would know in the front of the book, it says this was originally published as The Diary of a Magus, which was his pilgrimage to Compostela, the town in northern Spain.
Yeah, Camino.
Which has been, he goes every year, just turns up at cafes and goes to the swinging of the incense in the church, which is what it's famous for. So I met somebody who ran a hostel on that trip, and he said the number of pilgrims went up tenfold after Paulo became famous because people are trying to track his journey there. So that's good. That's good because people on pilgrimage has got to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, go back to Paulo. Sorry, I digress a bit. The book was being published in Brazil. It was a complete failure. That sounds weird because the book now has probably sold in excess of 100 million copies. All of his books combined have probably sold 150 million copies. If I tell you that the population of Great Britain is around 65, 64 million, that's sort of double the population of Great Britain have read The Alchemist, probably. It fell literally onto my desk. It was a Friday afternoon when I was working in Sydney, Australia, where I was working as one of the marketing directors there at HarperCollins. And the post guy, Doug, I still remember him to this day, back in 1993, he came in Friday afternoon, and he used to unceremoniously dump a pile of manuscripts onto my desk and say, get your teeth into that, Colm. He used to say. And I said, okay, anything good in there? And he said, well, there's a nice cover, actually. I didn't put this in my book. And I said, oh, really? Which one's that? He said, this one. Look, that's a really nice cover. And I said, you should never judge a book by its cover, Doug. And he said, oh, no, but I like that one. And I grabbed it and I looked at it. And it was like a magic moment. If you Google the original cover of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho in English, it's purple. It's got a shepherd boy. It's nothing like the version we have around today, and it had an Arab dressed figure who turns out to be the alchemist, and he has the all-seeing eye of God on his forehead, like a single eye. Don't ask me why, but I made the mistake and I judged the book by its cover, and I actually said, I'm going to take this home at the weekend. I never took books home at the weekend. I can't remember any other manuscript I ever took, because it was my job to decide, how many copies are we going to actually publish in Australia? Because in those days, there was no print on demand. You made a commitment and your career was, hung in the balance on whether this book actually sold what you ordered or didn't. And normally a book, first time author, it's a fable, so it's a bit fictiony, but it's really a self-help category. I don't know, 2,000 copies would be really generous. And I took it home, I read it, and I rang my colleague on the Monday morning in California who was looking after the book over there. And he said, oh, how many copies do you want? And I said, I want 200,000. And his immediate response was, are you drunk? I said, no. I said, this is going to be one of the best-selling books HarperCollins has ever published. He said, oh, okay, you're normally Mr. Conservative. And I said, yeah, I know, but I'm going to stick my neck right out this time. Trust me, I just have a knowing. If that story affected me, I've been on a spiritual journey. I know what moves people. I know what resonates. It's got so much resonance in it. It's just going to go off like wildfire. And of course, the rest is history. There's only one other book that's ever outsold it in the lifetime of an author, and that's J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Is
there any other book that's had the same impact on you in terms of we have to have this book and we have to print so many copies?
No.
Although I would imagine that having set that one up, if you said to them, you've got to take this book and you've got to really print a lot, they take you at your word now.
Oh, yes, I'm not there anymore, unfortunately. But they did, yes. I won't go into another, that's a whole nother story. I could keep you going half an hour on another book that I did a similar thing with. And actually, one of my books is by a guy called Dr. Wayne Dyer. I'm sure 50% of the people watching this presentation will have heard of Dr. Wayne Dyer. He rang me, because we used to publish his books as well. He'd heard about me and Paulo and the Alchemist, and he rang me in my office not long after, because his book Real Magic was just about to be released in paperback. And he rang me, and he'd never done that before. And he, in my office, said, oh, this is Dr. Wayne Dyer. Oh, hi, Wayne, how are you? He said, good. He said, there's something I need you to do for me. He said, yeah, whatever, He said, I need you to do the same magic that you did on Paulo Coelho's book for my book in Australia, please. I said, what do you mean, the magic that I did? I didn't like to say, well, it was an amazing book, and I'm sure your book's great, Dr. Wayne, but excuse me. But here's the thing, the market will decide, sort of thing. And it has gone on, and it's a mega bestseller as well. But it was that comment that he made to me, which was, can you do the same magic? You do the same magic. And so I have to credit Dr. Wayne Dyer with drawing my attention to something that I had never in my life before recognized, which I share now in my book, The Secret of the Alchemist, which is that we each, every single one of us, holds within us a degree of magical power. And I'm only using that term because I can't really think of anything else to describe it. So I'm not talking about making spells or waving wands or using toad's legs and boiling. I'm not talking about that, or being a magician in the sense of creating illusions. It's a sense of there is a power that we have to be able to bring and to manifest into being almost magically, in the sense that there's no other explanation for it, through our own psychic power. And my book, The Secret of the Alchemist, which was inspired by both Wayne's book, which is called Real Magic, and The Alchemist, which is all about alchemy, my book explains that I discovered that power through the art of alchemy. And one of the things that we'll talk about in a moment about Alchemist. Anyway, so long story short, the book became a mega bestseller. Within months of it being published, Paulo came to Australia, which was wonderful. I actually got to meet him. He invited my wife and myself out for a meal with his wife, Christina, who's just delightful, and our publicity director. And he said, I want to thank you both for all the wonderful support that you've both given. And he said to Naomi, here's a little gift that God and my wife said you might like. And he put his hand in his pocket, pulled out this little diamond ring, beautiful dressed diamond ring, worth a couple of $1,000. Amazing. And she immediately burst into tears. We all clapped, and it was one of those moments, and she deserved it. She's a great publicist. And then he looked at me and he said, Colm, I heard all about your phone call to your colleague in California, and he said, I have to say that you were the first person in the whole of the publishing industry who actually has predicted that this book is going to be a mega bestseller. And I agree with you. It is going to be a mega bestseller. So I want to thank you for that. So I've asked God what I should give. I'm thinking, what's coming? Is he going to put his hand in his pocket? Am I going to get a gold Rolex? That would be nice. How shallow can you be? And that was a symptom of my spiritual state at the time, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But he said, no, God told me to do a day of my time doing my alchemy magic just for you. I had no idea what he was talking about, Sandra. Not a clue. I mean, really? That was my first thought. And he said, yeah, and I've spoken to the universe, and I've asked the universe to give you whatever you want, that whatever you want will actually come to pass. And I've worked with the universe to make that happen. There's only one thing, that you need to decide what you want. And that was it. That was his gift to me. No explanation. He didn't even give me time to say, so, when you said you talked to the universe and you did your alchemy magic, what is that? No, it was, got flight to catch. See you later. Lovely evening. Thanks, everybody. And he was gone. But if you read my book, what you discover is that an enormous amount of shifting began to happen, both in my heart, in my psyche, but also in my circumstances, in my career at the same time. I was promoted unexpectedly, maybe because of the success of The Alchemist, I don't know, possibly. A couple of guys who were above me left and got better jobs somewhere else, so that left a space for me to be promoted. But all through that time, I was conscious that I wasn't really fulfilling what I thought was my true destiny. And from that night that I met Paulo and he said that he'd done that work for me, I can put that as a milestone right smack bang in the middle of my life. I was 40 years old when I was a bit like his character in the story. We'll talk about that in a second. In here, there's a guy called Santiago, the shepherd boy, and he arrives at the oasis and he's kind of settling in. He's got some spiritual powers. He's kind of met his love of his life, and he's sort of settling into the oasis, and he's thinking, you know what, this isn't such a bad place. I think I might just settle down here. What's the point in going all the way to the pyramids and risking my life with bandits and outlaws out in the desert? I'll just stay here. And that was the moment that the alchemist in the story confronts him, comes riding in on the white horse, dressed in black, with a hawk on his shoulder, and looks the shepherd boy in the eye and said, "You're not finished. You just need to know you're not finished. You've got further to go. There's greater treasure to be found, but you're the one who needs to decide if that's going to happen." So that's kind of what I did. And I finally left HarperCollins. I resigned. I ended up fulfilling my dream, which was to start my own advertising agency. And we became one of the largest advertising agencies in Australia. So the rest is history, as they say. So there we are.
And that's what happened on the outside.
Sandra, you always ask the difficult questions. Yeah. Okay. Well, we could talk about Hand on the Inside when we get to the book, maybe.
Okay. Well, tell us about the book now. I mean, it's number one on the list.
Yeah. I got somebody posted in my Facebook page, Colm Holland page, that that it's still number 4 in the Los Angeles Times all-time bestseller list.
Wow.
So it's still selling today. This book will never go away. You know, in England, many of you will have heard of the BBC. There's a program that's on the radio that's been around called Desert Island Discs, and they assume that the castaway, an imaginary cast, you're going to be a castaway on an imaginary island, and you're allowed to take so many records with you, and 2 books. One is the Bible, or the Quran, if you prefer, and the complete works of Shakespeare. And then they say, so if you can take one more book with you, which one would it be? So not just because it means so much to me, because this was a milestone in my life in many, many ways, but it also the satisfaction of knowing that decision I made has influenced, along with Paulo, together we've influenced millions of lives. We've inspired so many people to think again about that other dimension to their life, which they've probably forgotten, the dreams that they've buried, the self-awareness that they've stopped looking at, all of those things. And especially which happens so easily, and that's why I love this book, is it encourages us to believe that we can change ourselves and we can change the world around us. That's ultimately what it is. What most people don't realize, that it's also a handbook about alchemy. So if you read my book, my expose, if you like, is that this is more than just an inspiring tale, and it is a fable. It's also very much a handbook to how we can use the ancient principles of alchemy, which is pretty much lost down through the centuries and has been subdued and persecuted, especially in more recent times. We can actually use that as a sort of guidepost, a set of principles to actually help us to resurrect our dreams and to overcome the obstacles that want to get in the way. And of course, in the story of the alchemist in the desert, there's plenty of obstacles, many dangers out there. And of course, that's just a metaphor in the end for that inner journey. And those of you who have read Carl Jung and understand the principle of the unconscious and of the true self, that's what this book is about. It's a metaphor for that inner journey within, where we can discover our true self, which is our true treasure in the end of the day.
Which, you use the word resonate. You knew that this book would resonate with everyone. I mean, it really is everybody. It may not be their story, but it's their potential story.
Sure.
Every single person, has these dreams, wants to create something wonderful, wants to make a massive difference. So it really speaks to the part of us that we all have.
Yes.
But we've just lost connection with.
Yes. That desire, Sandra, though, I'm so pleased you raised that, because that desire to transform, if you like, let's give it a name, that desire to transform, that actually is in our genes.
Mm.
But it's in our physical genes, it's in our psychic genes, it's just part of what it means to be human. And it's so easy that I was shocked with how easily I almost buried that within myself. And the alchemist came along and just sort of slapped me across the face and said, you know, Paulo was my alchemist, really. And he just turned up at the right place in the right time. And he just thought he was saying, thank you, Colm, for what you've done, which was great. But actually, he was doing more than that. He was saying, you know, come on, you can do more if you decide what you want. And that's my challenge to everybody when you read this book. When you've finished and you put it down, just ask yourself one question, and that is, what do I really want? What is my heart actually telling me? You know, face it. And that'll bring us on to one of the books that we've got further down the list. But that's my story of the Alchemist. We probably shouldn't go on too much longer. But
okay, I have to ask you, are you still in touch with him?
Only via Facebook. Yeah, not. But millions of people want to be in touch with Paulo. So,
Of course they do. Of course they do.
When I'll tell you a little. Do you want a little omen story? Do you want a little inside?
Give us, yes.
You got
Go
time?
for it. Yeah.
Okay. So when the book was published back in August, I asked the universe, what should I do beyond the publicity that I already had? And I was told to hire an independent publicist and just let them write, give them a copy of your book and just let them write their own sort of third-party publicity sheet, and then let them send it to all the major newspapers around the world. And I thought, oh, you know, I'm not, it's quite a good story, but, you know, immediately that sort of doubt came and said, oh, you know, that's being a bit ambitious. You really think people would pick it up? And I just felt the universe was saying, yes, yeah, come on, let's do this. And so I did it. I obeyed, and it went off on about 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. By 5 a.m. on Thursday, my son, who keeps track of everything that's going on in my social calendar and networks, pings me on my phone and said the Daily Mail in Britain, which is the biggest selling newspaper in the whole of Great Britain, has done a huge double page spread online about your book. And I thought, can I just let me go back to sleep and wake up from this dream, because this is going to be a dream. And he said, no, go. You know, so there I am at 4 o'clock in the morning, and sure enough, there it was. And he said, do you want the best bit? I said, there's more. I said, yeah. Paulo Coelho personally has seen the publicity in the Daily Mail, and he's retweeted it and he's reposted it on his Facebook pages with a big thumbs up saying, you know, well done for writing that book. So here you go, everybody. There's a really interesting thing. If I'd ignored that little voice in my heart that was saying, do this, or I doubted the value of that, that would never have happened. And I wouldn't have been actually back probably in contact with Paulo either. So two great things came out of that.
Let that be a lesson to everybody who watches this, that, you know, don't ever let doubt get in the way. If you want to do it, do it. It's yours to do. If it's that strong in you, it's yours to do. Okay, so let's move on to book number 2, which is Reflections on the Art of Living by Joseph Campbell.
Yes, I don't know if anybody else prior to me has ever brought this book.
Not this one.
No, because so this never leaves my bedside, as I think I've said on your webpage. It never leaves my bedside. It is an anthology of the works of the great Joseph Campbell. Those of you who are not familiar with Joseph Campbell, he's probably most famous because he inspired George Lucas for the plot of Star Wars. You know, and he's actually much more famous for lots of other things like great wisdom and great thinking. And this is a fabulous anthology by Diane Osborne, who interviewed him and recorded many of his lectures at the institute that was established, named after him, the Joseph Campbell Foundation. And it covers all of the deepest wisdom that he's drawn in his understanding from all of the world's mythologies. this guy was Joseph Campbell was a walking encyclopedia of ancient mythology. And you say, well, why would that be so interesting? The reason that I became such a fan of Joseph Campbell is that he discovered, and when you do the reading for yourself, it doesn't matter which cultural mythologies you study, whether it's in Sanskrit or whether it's in Greek or whether it's North American native mythology or Chinese or Indian Peninsula or even parts of Africa where they've still got verbal mythologies running. The same themes continuously reappear and reappear and reappear in different forms. And so Campbell eventually formed, and he was influenced by others who had very similar thinking at the time. We're talking the 1940s, 1950s, last century. The principle he came up with is twofold, really. One is that, of course, all mythology comes from us. None of these stories were sent from some divine being out of the sky. Keep taking the tablets joke, etc. All of that. Though this is invented by human beings. But what's interesting is that out of the psyche of disparate human beings from disparate cultures who've never met, who've never had any contact with each other, even in Aboriginal cultures where they've been isolated for 70, 80,000 years from anybody else in the world, the same themes continuously reappear. And they are themes that come from the collective unconscious. This was one of the things that Carl Jung, of course, based his philosophy of the collective unconscious, which is that we all carry within us the same impulses, the same primal urges and primal thinking and primal emotions and so on that shape us as humans. That's what makes us humans. So the characters are all usually different. The plots are slightly different usually. The punchlines are different in all of the mythologies, but if you study them, you discover that there are strong central themes coming through. And there's one in particular, of course, and that's the hero's journey, which is what Star Wars was based on. And that he calls the monomyth. And so he's my hero. Actually, as an academic, as an inspirational teacher. And I love the quote that Diane put on the back. Can I just read you these few lines on the back?
Of course.
Because this really sums up Joseph Campbell. And he says that the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. The goal of the hero trip, which is his monomyth, down to the jewel point, is to find those levels in the psyche that open to finally open to the mystery of yourself, being Buddha consciousness or the Christ. That's the journey. Mm-hmm. Quite happy to have that inscribed on my tombstone, although I'm probably going to get scattered. But if anybody's listening who's going to be responsible for my tombstone, just put that on it. I'll be happy. Because that's the message that I would love to give to everybody who stands at my grave and says, "What did this guy believe?" Oh, yeah, Joseph Campbell said it all for me.
Mm. Okay, so book number 3 is a book that you say most people don't know about, and it is The Supreme Gift by Paulo Coelho.
Yes, it's probably his least selling book. He's not particularly ever promoted it. It was published by himself. He's got an agency who publishes various books. It's his translation interpretation of a sermon that was given by a guy called Henry Drummond in Britain back in the 18th century. And it's all about unconditional love. And it starts with the quote, "If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, guess what? I'm just a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." And the Paulo really, even though his tradition was a Catholic background, and Henry Drummond's was very much the opposite tradition, quite sort of Wesleyan, Bible, word-based faith. Paulo is nailing his colours to the mast and saying that actually doesn't matter what we write and what we say and what we do. In the end, if we don't have love, then we are nothing, really. That's it. And so, yep, there's not much more to that book to say, except, yeah, that's what it's about. And I think it's just important that somebody like Paulo is prepared to say that, because it's what I believe as well, completely.
Why do you think it's not been so successful?
Because A, it's not ever really been promoted, but B, I think he just wanted it to be out there. It's not a story, it's a sermon.
Mm.
You know, and that's not everybody's cup of tea. But if you're into sermons, then I highly recommend it. And his spin on it is particularly nice, because Paulo has a little introduction to it where he says that the greatest power in the universe, and this is what I hold to be true as well, is unconditional love. If you want to be the most powerful person in your world, then you need to be the most loving. I know that we were talking about power and politicians earlier. Let's just keep that in mind.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so book number 4. I am not familiar with this one. Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert A. Johnson.
This was the original version. I've still got it. The cover on the page is different. I just want to show you how thin it is. You could read this with your morning coffee pretty much, except it's, and the print's really big, and it's only a few pages, but it is probably one of the second or third most influential books of my life. The day that somebody concisely and so eloquently describes the phenomenon of which we all suffer from, which is the shadow self in Jungian terms. He just said it in a few words in a way that you could all, I personally was able to take away and always remember. So when my shadow self decides it's going to crash into my world like the dragon breathing fire character that it can be, we all have this, and when we judge others and when we blame others for our predicament, or when we blame others, I mean, it's just the shadow itself. It's just that, I'm sure most of your listeners know exactly what I'm talking about. But Robert Johnson was a teacher and a psychoanalyst in the Jungian school, and he wrote several books. He, she, we, they're all short titles. They're all as thin as this. But I would say that the body of his work, if you stuck it all together into a single volume, he would be, in my opinion, probably the greatest interpreter of the works of Carl Jung ever. So if you can't manage, if you find Carl Jung difficult to read, strongly recommend Robert Johnson.
Okay. Number 5, The Quantum Revelation, Paul Levy.
Yes. Do you know Paul Levy at all?
No, I don't think so, no.
Underrated, under-recognized, major thinker. I was going to write this book. And then, so I started to do some research to see if anybody else, what have people said about the relationship between quantum physics and quantum mechanics? And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, just Google it, you'll see. So, we're talking nuclear physics here, the world of the atom, the world of the immeasurable bits of matter that fill the universe and drive everything and make everything tick and work. That's quantum mechanics. I've always believed, and certainly Carl Jung again kicked the ball down this road and said there's a relationship between the human psyche and quantum mechanics. So the world of science and the world of the psyche, the mystical world of the psyche, are connected. And he had long conversations with several early quantum scientists, which, we're talking pre-atomic bomb days and so on, where the power and the consequences of what scientists were discovering in the world of quantum physics would have an impact. And so he was very conscious of that. and said that we are able to manifest in many ways events in the world of physics just from our own psychic viewpoint. I won't bore. Some people find this sort of thing all very boring. I find it absolutely fascinating. It's ironic that the one subject when I was at high school that I got the highest score in all my exams was physics, but I never went down the road of. I decided not to follow science. I went down the arts road, and I used to teach comparative religions and world history. But physics has never left me so if you're really interested in the connection between the human psyche and the world of science and quantum physics, and Paul's done it brilliantly. Great job, Paul. If he ever sees me talking about this book on your podcast, Sandra.
Do you know him?
No. He's on my list to reach out to and just say,
okay,
give him a thumbs up and say, if you'd love me to have you on my podcast, then I'd be honored.
Okay, we'll send him this way too, because that's just the sort of book that turns me on.
Oh yeah, no, it's great. It's great, great fodder for the mind, for sure.
Yeah. So number 6, this was mentioned last week by Teresa. It's been mentioned maybe 2 or 3 times, not as frequently as I feel it should. I was glad to see it on your list, and it is a favourite of mine, The Road Less Travelled by M. Scott Peck.
It's an interesting book, Sandra. It's a bit, when was it written now? I think I said this on the...
Was it in the 80s?
Yeah, it was early. No, originally 1978.
78, okay.
There's ways in which I would actually say it's a bit dated in terms of a lot of people have given a lot more thought to the same topic now since, and I think we've got more insight, but working with what he knew and what was available. He was a doctor and he was a practicing psychiatrist, and it's full of case studies of people's real struggles with trying to live a meaningful life without destroying other people and the relationships around them. And so this book single-handedly probably triggered me to begin to think about what does it mean to live a fulfilled life from a holistic point of view. And it's called A New Psychology of Love, Traditional Values and Spiritual Growth. Confronting and solving problems is a painful process, and most of us run away from them. And I think this book I have to credit with encouraging me not to run away from the pain, and that by facing the inner pain and discovering the causal hurts behind that pain that lead us to become angry, or lead us to lash out, or lead us to suicidal or destructive thoughts of any description. This book is great. I think most modern readers that have read other more recent books on the subject will struggle with this a bit, but I just needed to put it in the list because it influenced me.
It influenced me too, as did the next book on your list, Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. I love his work. I loved that book. I thought he did a wonderful job of really helping us, look at where we were heading. And I actually had the great privilege of interviewing him a couple of years ago. And what a lovely, lovely man he is too.
Yes, great admirer. Don't agree with everything in the book. But that's fine. He doesn't need you to agree with everything. In fact, he's quite, his writing in a way is sort of almost apologetic, saying, look, this is what I think, and here's some studies to back that up. But I it's quite happy for other people to come to other conclusions, which that in itself, Sandra, is it not? That's a sign of emotional intelligence right there. So he does practice what he preaches, and that is, it's fine to hold a position. It's fine to base your life on that position. And it's fine to behave and to conduct your relationships from that position. But somebody who has what he calls, the EI factor, the emotional intelligence factor, can also see that, this person's got a completely different position, and so is that person, and that's okay. And that, one of the things about being intelligent is to be able to embrace those other points of view, but also work with them, and to your own benefit. A lot of people go charging through life, especially at the moment. I don't know what it is, Sandra, if you can help me understand what it is, what this disease is that we've got at the moment in our society, which I guess social media has encouraged it, which is, this is what I believe, and I'm not, this is it. I live in this world, and I'm going to charge through my life believing this. And if I do that, then I'm going to be successful, and everything I want to do is going to happen. And guess what? According to Daniel Goleman, and he's right, that's a life doomed to failure. And all you'll be doing is sort of banging your head against a wall, bang, 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 on a regular basis, because you're lacking the ability to see beyond your own thoughts, your own beliefs, your own framework. And that the most successful people, the majority of people, are people who are totally committed to a goal and how to get there. But there are people who adapt, who are flexible, who can hear what other people are going to say, open to other opinions, open to change, and go, oops, this isn't working. Okay, let's do this, and so on. So this book has spurned, has it not, probably dozens and dozens and dozens of successful, how to succeed in business and how to succeed in life. But he was the original, apart from the book that I didn't choose, which was, how to win friends and influence people, which I'm sure you've had that one many, many times.
Actually, we have not.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, we have not yet.
Okay, that's my 11th book then. Okay, we'll tag it on to you.
Well, to answer your question, you asked if I could throw any light on this. There is somebody who I read an article by him about a week or 2 weeks ago that I thought summed it up perfectly. And this guy is one of the best astrologers I've ever come across. Okay. He's also an investigative journalist, and that was his original training. Oh. And he writes the most incredible articles and commentaries on what is happening in society and in our cultures today, and also brings the astrology into it. And he wrote an article on that very subject about how is it that people, have these beliefs, and everything is telling them this is not true, but they will not let go of the belief.
Yes.
So he gave a wonderful answer to that. Okay. So I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you.
I'll send it to you later. And if anyone else wants a copy of it, let me know and I'll send it to you as well. Okay, so book number 8, you referenced this earlier, which is Real Magic by Wayne Dyer.
You just got to read it. It's just, there's some books you just got to read because they earmark just universal principles that you should just know.
Yes.
The key to Wayne Dyer is that he had an inner humility, and he has millions of followers. I mean, he's extremely, well, it passed away, unfortunately, now. But if you go to YouTube and put in Wayne Dyer, there's lots and lots of his talks, and so he was a groundbreaker in the whole concept of examining yourself and understanding how much you need to begin to love yourself, and how much power there is as well within each of us, and that if we are prepared to acknowledge that and tap into that, then real magic will begin to happen in life. As I said in my story earlier, that book was published quite soon after The Alchemist, and I guess in a way Wayne Dyer gave me a language framework around which to describe what was happening to me in my life, even though he didn't ever mention alchemy, of course, which is a road that I'm going to. Just to go back just for a moment as well, if anybody is interested in what I had to say about Joseph Campbell and his anthology, there is another book called The Power of Myth, which is also by Joseph Campbell, which is interviews with Bill Moyers, which they did back on PBS in, oh gosh, I don't know, whenever it was, 1994. I think it was really quite a long time ago. Some of those are still available online, and he says one of the demises that we have as a society, just going back to that other point, is that we don't have any mythology anymore. One of the powers that mythology has over the organization of society is that mythology embeds values that we all cherish. So whatever your stance is on religion and various, religion, the power of religion lies in its mythology.
Yes.
Do good to those who hurt you, turn the other cheek, welcome strangers, and all of those principles that live within many religions are mythological, and there's power in that mythology, in the sense that it gives us things to found our lives on. These are foundational pillars that we can build on. And he says that we've lost a lot of that, but hopefully Star Wars. My grandson is coming up to 8 years old, and we're just helping refurbish his bedroom. And guess what? The lampshade, the bedspread, the curtains, and almost everything in it is Star Wars. So I'm just hoping that the mythology has an impact.
Yeah. So book number 9, Contemplative Prayer by Thomas Merton.
Yes. So I'm going to apologize. I'm sort of ending, and I'm going to reference number 10 as well, which is, if I may, Sandra, which is Dark Night of the Soul, because you can't really understand Thomas Merton and contemplative prayer unless you understand what the Dark Night of the Soul. So we've all heard of the Dark Night of the Soul. Not many people know where the phrase came from. It wasn't the original poem, but it was a poem by St. John of the Cross, a Catholic mystic, who wrote a poem, and I think I forgot what he called it something else, but it got nicknamed the Dark Night of the Soul because that was one of the phrases in the poem. And what St. John of the Cross was doing, and what Thomas Merton then wrote quite a few meditations, and he did lots of exegesis on the original poem. And that is that in the Dark Night of the Soul, it's a spiritual / psychic phenomenon which Joseph Campbell would say is common to us all. It's the Dark Night of the Soul, the ability to experience the Dark Night of the Soul is part of being human. And all mythologies have it. Most human beings will experience some form of it at some time. So what is it? Well, it's the complete loss of purpose and meaning. It's when we get to the point that we can't see the point, if you pardon the tautology of that. It's that point in life that can be brought on by circumstance, particularly grief. Grief is a great trigger, enormous trigger for the loss of sense of purpose and self and love, and just almost quite often the will just to carry on. The St. John of the Cross decided to explore those feelings and those emotions in his relationship to God. So he put it into a spiritual context, because he said one of the ways that we can get through that feeling of loss, that terrible feeling of grief, is to sort of hang on to this concept that there is a God, and that God cares about us, and we can hang on to that image of God that we have, and that will see us through it. The double whammy of the poem and the understanding of the true Dark Night of the Soul is that even that faith, even that imagery that we have of some kind of deity who's looking after us, that disappears as well. And that's a really dark place. So there's like nothing left. So when I read, the reason I discovered the poem by St. John of the Cross was because of Thomas Merton. So Thomas Merton, the famous Christian mystic of the last century, who bridged the gap between Christianity and Buddhism, embraced both traditions and started really as a school of contemplative prayer, which is what the title of this book. One of the central tenets of his thinking of what, if you really want to have a spiritual experience of solid contemplative prayer, then you have to do what St. John of the Cross did, and you have to go allow your spirit, your soul, your heart, whatever you call it, to experience the dark night of the soul, to the point that even your spiritual faith, whether you believe in deities or you don't believe in deities, even your belief in angels, whatever is your, your the things you hang on to get you through, the dark night of the soul means letting go of all of that as well. It's Dante's Inferno, to use another mythology. And then Merton said that if you're prepared to take that journey and to experience the horrors of that, you are going, there are some typical consequences that will manifest as you go through it. So that's why I say it's not just the end. You're just not going into complete dark. Then 2 or 3 things will begin to happen when you are prepared to abandon yourself to the true dark night of the soul, and they are that there is, you just suddenly discover that there is a new light at the end of the tunnel. A new light begins to appear that is completely different from your old light. So the lights that used to lead you fade, but as they fade, a new light comes almost from within. And the problem is that there's a gap between letting go of the old lights and discovering the new light. And that's not a very happy place to be. That's a really, pretty terrible place to be. But he says if we hang on in there and we're prepared to hold fast and trust in ourselves that we have within us the same knowledge and spiritual understanding as any of the great mystics of any time, of any of the apostles or any of the leaders of any of the religions. Many of them went through this. Buddha went through this. Christ went through this. That's what's meant by, they died and went into hell. It's a similar experience. So if you're prepared to hang in there with whatever mythology we're using, then a new light will begin to emerge. And that new light, however, will be indefeatable. It will never be conquered. It doesn't matter whatever happens. It doesn't matter if you are spurned by those around you, your circumstances. It's irrelevant, because that inner light cannot be taken away, and it becomes the new light by which is. And going back to Joseph Campbell, which is kind of sort of looping around the 10 books, if you like, that is the self. When we go down and down and open, part of that will be going through the dark night of the soul. So I read this book when I was in my mid-20s, when I was beginning my journey of personal transformation, and I read it, and I read The Dark Night of the Soul, the poem, and between the two of them, I actually made the decision that I was going to go there.
You made the decision you were going to go there.
I was going to go there. I was going to go on a journey of the dark night of the soul. Yeah. I actually resigned my job as a high school teacher, and managed to get a fairly just manual job where I didn't need my brain particularly to do it. And every day I would go off, and it lasted about a year. I can't believe I did it now. So, it's like, whatever you do, folks, don't try this at home kind of advice, really, because, yeah, it was pretty horrific. But it was the beginning and set me on the path for the rest of my life that there is a really important discovery. And the books that I've chosen kind of reflect this, I guess, Sandra, in a way, is that within us, each of us, there is the divine. Within each of us, there is the light. Within each of us, there is the true self. And that is the journey. That is the alchemist journey. that is the journey of Santiago, the shepherd boy, and that was Thomas Merton's journey. And if you read the biographies of all the great mystics and all the great spiritual leaders of any faith or any tradition of any sort, those that have got the most to say are the ones that have been on that journey and have been through the dark night of the soul. It's very hard to be authentic and to own your own personal transformation without going through it. So am I advocating that we should all have a nervous breakdown? No. No, I'm not. But what I am advocating is that if you haven't faced and hadn't taken a committed look at the parts of your own psyche that you would rather ignore and you would rather run away from, so we're now going back to the road less traveled. If you are prepared to walk that road less traveled, it is the road to freedom and joy and happiness and fulfillment and all the things that we, our souls fully want. So that kind of sums up my life, and that's what I've written about in my book, The Secret of the Alchemist. And the only thing that we probably haven't mentioned is that in my study of the original book, The Alchemist, I did manage to discover that within the teachings and the principles of the ancient alchemists going back 4,000 or 5,000 years in Egypt, they discovered exactly what we've been talking about for the last hour. They knew this. They hid it because they knew the power of it in symbols and in laboratory kind of terminology and codes that nobody could decipher. The whole concept of turning lead into gold, of course, now we understand, is a psychic journey where we take the leaden parts of ourselves that are weighing us down and we turn them into our greatest treasure, which is represented by the gold. That is the alchemist journey. That's the hero's journey. That's the journey of all the great mystics of all time, really.
Wow. And you have a podcast called The Alchemy Lab, and I was looking at your website earlier, and you have a little message there, which is very fitting right now, tacking on to what you just said, which is that once we find our treasure at the end of that journey, it is vital that we give it away to the benefit of our world.
Absolutely. Otherwise it will just rot.
Yes.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that we, this is interesting. There's a reason why the alchemists, kind of use the symbology of riches. Gold is a valuable object. I'm just going to throw in a little side interjection here, is what did the three wise men bring the baby Jesus in the mythology of the birth of Christ? Three very valuable objects: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But yeah, it was gold. That's not a coincidence. That's the writers of the Christian story saying, this is the child within, the Christ within, is our greatest treasure. That we're on. They're honoring that. If you take that view of Christian mythology, the attainment of gold and wealth and money in and of itself is not a bad thing at all. And I don't know why so many some traditions particularly, despise wealth and despise gold, despise, manna, manna from heaven. When actually, if it's used responsibly and correctly, it's an agent for change. I'm a big enemy of poverty. If there's one thing I'm against.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? None of us want to be poor. None of us intend to be poor. But so many of us resist being wealthy.
The thousands, millions of children who die across the world every year from just nothing other than poverty, just breaks my heart continuously. We almost try and ignore it and forget it, but it's such so many millions of lives have never had the opportunity to live a full life as we've been so immensely privileged. I count, my life as an immense privilege when you see what poverty has done to so many societies, and still is, and disease, and all of the abuse that goes on. It's very hard to even think of it at times, because it can become so. I find it so overwhelming personally. But what can we do? And this is my thing, really. And as I say in the end of my book, there's only really one thing we can do. We can just do our bit, and that's twofold. One is we can actively use the gold, the treasure of our inner self and our own passion that we've discovered. We can do that to change our own world immediately around us in a practical way. But psychically, I genuinely believe that by making a personal journey of transformation and arriving with that inner gold nourishes the soul of the world, that we are, by just that humble act. And this is why ancient hermits used to go off into huts. And people used to criticize them and say, well, what good are you doing? You should be out with the missionaries. You should be out, feeding the poor. And they would say, but I'm sacrificing myself to help nourish the soul of the world. And there's some truth in that belief. So I don't. So I see it as two opposites, and that's the whole principle of alchemy. Alchemy is full of paradoxes, and if you read my book, so I talk about those paradoxes. The art of alchemy is bringing paradoxical opposites and unifying them into one, and that is Carl Jung's whole theory of individuation, which is the marriage of the unconscious and the conscious part of the mind. But when we do that, it also marries all of the other potential conflicting and opposite pulls on our time and our thoughts and our energy.
So here we have your 10 best books, 11 actually, you sneaked one in. People do that. They will be disobedient.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. And I have to ask you, if some young person at the beginning of their journey asked you to recommend one of these 10 books, which one would it be? Of course it would. Of course it would. Yeah. Perfect for somebody just starting out on their journey. Absolutely ideal. Perfect. Yeah.
Absolutely. Any stage of the journey. Yep.
And another little thing we do, that I asked you for keywords to put on your page when we published your list, and you gave us, writer, speaker, alchemist, author,
yes,
mentor, adventurer, grandfather. Okay. Now I want one that is not at all lofty, not the sort of thing you would put in your CV, but something that really gives us an insight into who you are, maybe something that only your family or your friends would know. And it can be very, very quirky, something fun.
I have an obsession. Does that count?
What is it? Depends.
Oh, I thought I could just be any. I thought I could say anything.
Well, it depends whether we want to put it on your page.
I love chocolate.
Ah, that's okay.
I'm addicted to chocolate, dark chocolate. I have to curb it. It's, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't eat meat, all of those things, but I do eat chocolate. And my grandkids, pull my leg about it. And one of the first things they ever say to me when they see me is, "Oh, Papa, have you got any chocolate?" So there you go.
So nobody is ever at a loss to, for a birthday or Christmas present for you.
No, not at all. Easy.
Okay. So what shall we call you? A chocolate monster?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm more than happy to be given that name. That'd be fabulous.
That will be added to your page.
Thank you.
I'll make sure. Chocolate monster.
Yes, and of course, if you want my address to send the chocolate to for Christmas, everybody, we'll put that in there as well.
You can send it via me.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll let some through. Is there anything else that you want to share before we say goodbye to everybody?
I want to say thank you to you, Sandra. you're amazing. And thank you for your commitment over all the years to allow people like me and others to join you really in having fabulous conversations and giving us the opportunity to share and nourish the soul of the world together. I guess that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you, Sandra.
Well, thank you for saying that. Having conversations is, if I wasn't doing it, it would be my one big achievement that I have to do, because, I'm a Gemini, I'm a double Gemini. I love to communicate with people. And so having people like you sending books my way gives me an opportunity to have some wonderful conversations.
And well, I've really
you,
enjoyed it today. Thank you.
You will be on my radio show in the next couple of months. I know.
Yes,
we have you
yes.
scheduled to talk about your book. So I shall look forward to that. And I'm sure everybody who's watching and gets to view this over the next few months will come along for that as well. Colm Holland, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra. Thanks everyone for listening.
And thank you to everybody at home for joining us. And as always, if you want to be the first to be notified of these events, if you find that you might forget and need that last minute reminder, then you do need to join, sign up for the Save My Place registration form, which is on the video page of the website. And please do join the No BS Spiritual Book Club's private Facebook page. I'm feeling a little bit sad because we do have quite a few people over there, but nobody's talking to one another. And every now and then, because I don't get notifications because nobody's posting, but every now and then I go in there and try to get a little conversation going. So it would be great if you would all join that and we can have some more dialogues. We'll be back again next week. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you then.